Test. Okay. Good evening. Good evening. Let's pray and we'll get started. We'll sing some songs, praise God, and then get things started. Lord, thank you for this Wednesday. Thank you for your care for us, your love for us. Thank you that you know what you're doing. I pray that you'd help us to believe that. I pray that you'd help us to understand that you're not only are you in charge, but you've had this whole thing planned out for a long, long time. God, we pray that you'd help us to grow in faith, grow in our understanding of you, of what you're doing, and in the moments and in the spaces and the places and times where we can't understand or see what you're doing, help us to trust you. Help us to trust that you've got things under control. Lord, help us to grow tonight. Help us to change. Help us to become more like you. Help us to look more like you from the things that we learn tonight. In your name, amen.
Lord, there is none like you. There is none like you. No one else can touch my heart like you do. And I can search for all eternity long and find there is none like you. There is none like you. No one else can heal my heart like you can. And I can search for all eternity long and find there is none like you. None like you, Lord. There is none like you. No one else can change my life like you do. And I can search for all eternity long and find there is none like you. There is none like you. Hallelujah. No one else can meet my needs like you do, Lord. And I can search for all eternity long and find there is none like you. There is none like you. No one else can touch my heart like you do. And I can search for all eternity long and find there is none like you. There is none like you. Hallelujah. What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. Oh, because we do not care. Everything to God in prayer. Every trials and temptation. Oh, in the end, we should never be discouraged. To the Lord in prayer. We've often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. Oh, because we do not care. Oh, we do not care. Everything to God in prayer. Are we weak and heavy laden, with the load of care? Precious Savior, still our refuge. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer.
Right. We got a lot of announcements. Here we go. Service on Sunday, 8:30 a.m. That's the earliest service. There's no stream for that service. Then we have the 10 a.m. for Sunday school and 11 o'clock service after that. Tuesday, we've got 6:30 a.m. Men's prayer group. And then Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. Bible study and prayer with interactive stream. I wonder if the pastor has all these memorized. You can give offering. You can give in person through the offering box in the back, or you can do it online through our website, cornerstonebaptisthbg.com. If you want somebody to blame for the long domain name, I may or may not be the one to blame. You can mail your offering to the church via mail if you want, or you can also subscribe to CBC updates in the newsletter and get updates like that. And if you're watching online, feel free to share the stream. Hi, hello, greetings, happy Wednesday to everyone who's watching online. It's almost good to see you, but I can't see you. And Bread and More Ministry, nothing tonight, but Sunday, almost certainly. Right, December, we've got the February Days of Praise now available in the vestibule, I think that's how you pronounce that, or you can access it always, the online version, at icr.org/DOP. Master Life Women's Bible Study will meet next Saturday, November 19th at 10 a.m., from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Chapter 2, a ministry for divorced and widow women, will meet on Tuesday, November 15th at 9 a.m. at the Promenade Family Restaurant, 5290 Dairy Street, Harrisburg. Marilyn Carmen's Winter Wonderland Craft Night is postponed until further notice. Operation Christmas Child boxes will need to be returned Sunday, November 13th. That's this coming Sunday, right? I think that's true. They ask that you include a $10 shipping donation, and we will have an offering to offset the cost on November 13th. Young Adult Ministry will meet at church on Tuesday, 15th at 6:30 p.m. I did it the fastest I've ever done it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Sweet. We'll have another song, and then we'll begin.
He is exalted, the King is exalted on high, and I will praise him. He is exalted forever, exalted, and I will praise his name. For he is the Lord, and forever his truth shall reign. Heaven and earth shall rejoice in his glory. He is exalted, the King is exalted on high. He is exalted, he is exalted on high. I will praise him, he is exalted shall rejoice in his holy name. He is exalted, the King is exalted on high. He is the Lord. He is exalted, the King is exalted on high. Oh, 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 oh. He is exalted, King is exalted on
Right. I've heard it said in lots of different ways and about lots of different subjects that you can, for example, tell a lot about a person based on how they spend their money, which I think is true, and I can back that up by it would be strange if everyone could see exactly how I spend my money. I've also heard said you can tell a lot about, for example, a woman by what's in their pocketbook. I wouldn't know. Never been one. But also that, like, you can tell a lot about a person based on what they throw away. That is, if you didn't know anything about me and all you had was, like, the history of, like, what I threw away in the garbage over the last year, there are things that you'd be able to glean from that about the kind of person that I am, or maybe about the kind of people we are. But one thing that I think is also true, relative to the book of Ruth and what we're going through tonight, is that you can tell a lot about a person or a culture based on the rules and guidelines that they set, both spoken and unspoken. For example, if you ever come over to my house, you may hear me share with my children, no toys at the table. But if you just got that, you say, hey, okay, so we have Daniel Golden, we have rule underneath, no toys at the table, and you didn't know anything about them, you could glean a lot from that about us from that rule. Like, oh, they must have children, or they really still like toys. Or, for example, that maybe we value the time around the table and the relationships that can potentially be built there above the fun of our children for that moment. There are lots of other kinds. And I think for some folks, unspoken rules and guidelines can be tough to pick up on because they're unspoken. I'm one of those people, and so I find myself like stepping on like cultural no-nos and yeses, if that's a thing. For example, one time I went to Colombia, South America. My mom's from South America, and I went to go visit, and it was great. It was wonderful. I didn't speak the language, but I had a ton of good food. And one thing that stood out the most to me was going from house to house, from cousin that I never met to aunt that I never met to uncle that I never met, going in their house and like just walking in the door to like a ton of people. People sitting over here, eating a sandwich or eating this, and and I remember going in and being raised to like greet people when I walk into a house. It's like, oh, this one I can do. Like this is an unspoken role I can take care of. So I walk in, say, hey everybody. I mean, I know how to say like, hola a todos is like basically hi everyone in Spanish. And then then I go do my thing. Where's the food? Where are like the people my age roughly? I think I was like 17 or so. But then later on, I found out that I had once again stepped on like a little cultural landmine, I suppose. Because what I didn't know is that in that culture, you're not supposed to give like a single greeting for the whole room. Maybe that's true in our culture too, and I've been doing it wrong for 31 years, but I don't. Anyway, what you're supposed to do is go to each person, hug, hey, how are you? Good to see you. Hey, how are you? Good to see you. Every person in the room. I mean, if there's 30 people, every single one. I didn't know that. That was a surprise to me. But one of the things that communicates to me about that culture is that they value relationships above, for example, time in a context like that. It's not exactly efficient to greet everyone one by one, but that's an example of like a custom that surprised me then. There's also, for example, nowadays, I find myself, I think, in a strange in-between land. And this may sound funny to you, I guess, depending on when you grew up. But some people, when they see me, they're like, oh yes, young man, sweet, like squarely fits in the category of young guy. And others, when they see me, they think, no, he's like grown up, like full-fledged adult, kids. He probably has a gray or two. And so for me, what that means is when I'm texting people, I'm not really always sure how to do it. Like I don't always know what I'm doing. For example, sometimes when I'm texting people, I use I why are we talking about this? I'm going somewhere. Okay. I capitalized the first letter of the word in the sentence because that's what you do. It's English. Right. Okay, great. At the end of the sentence, of course, I add a period because that's what you do. It's English. Except for it's 2022, and the people younger than me sometimes find that kind of like use of punctuation, aggressive and cold. No, am I joking, Match? Completely true, he says. This is completely true. And he's only like 2 years younger than me. I don't know, 4. Anyway, so there's like this whole etiquette around like, and nobody told me until like I watched a YouTube video and realized, oh, I'm doing it wrong. I'm doing this completely wrong. But what that communicates to me about like I suppose that generation, if I can slap that label on those people, on that like group of people, is that they value accuracy and sensitivity in communication above tradition when it comes to, for example, texting. Okay, great. Ruth, I think it's also true that we can learn a lot about God, that we can learn a lot about, for example, the people who make rules or laws based on the laws that they put into place. The Old Testament is full of laws, lots and lots and lots of laws. Some very well-known, some not well-known at all. And one of the laws that we're going to talk about today is I don't know if it's actually called this, but one of the ways we refer to it today is the idea of the law of levirate marriage, where, for example, the story of the widow who had 7 husbands that the Pharisees asked in the New Testament. Okay, essentially, if I get married and I die without having any children, one of my unmarried brothers is responsible for marrying my wife, having a child in my name. That way my legacy might be carried on. And I think we can learn something about God based on the fact that he put a law like that into place. Why would he do that? What is so important to God about my legacy or I don't know. I'm not exactly sure how to describe it. That he would put a law into place, but it doesn't stop there. That's just as it pertains to marriage. It's also true that, for example, if I have like such intense financial struggles that I have to sell off my land, which, I suppose isn't that big a deal today, but in Israel, in the days when, of the judges and the kingdom of David and all this time, each tribe was allotted a section of land. And each person, or like a family, would be allotted a section of land that you are not supposed to sell. Like, you don't sell this unless you absolutely have to. And if I come under such hard financial times that I have to sell this, then it's so that like in 50 years, if I'm not able to buy it back, that land automatically comes back to me at the year of Jubilee. Or, for example, that if I have to sell myself into slavery, like say, I don't know, I have too many debts and I can't afford to pay them, or I've done, who knows? And I say, Bernie, I'm so sorry. Thanks for like buying that house from me. I can't pay you back. Like, here I go. I'll do whatever you need. I'll be his servant until the year of Jubilee, max 50 years. Unless, of course, I have a redeemer kinsman. I actually don't remember what is the exact term they describe it as here. The guardian redeemer is how this book describes it. But the idea is the same. A guardian redeemer who will basically come and redeem me from whatever the situation is. In the scenario where I had to like sell myself into slavery to Bernie, a fellow Israelite, a guardian redeemer can come and say, okay, I'm going to pay his debt so that you will release him and he can come back and be a normal person. Or if I sold the land, I'm going to buy that land back even though the original owner can't do it so that I can remain in the family. Or in this scenario, a story of Ruth, I'm going to both buy the land and marry the widow who never had children to the husband, right, to carry this on. And I think it says a lot about God that he would put rules and laws in place like that for the people of Israel. And one of the things that I want to talk about tonight is, what does it teach us about God? What can we learn about God from the fact that he would put rules like that in place? And before we go there, I'd like to read through this. Ruth chapter 3, it's only 18 verses. I'm not the greatest reader in the world, but I'm going to do my best. Ruth chapter 3, 1 and down through verse 18, which is the end of the chapter. Okay, verse 1. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said unto her, My daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee? And now is not Boaz of our kindred, with whose maidens thou wast? Behold, he winnoweth barley tonight in the threshing floor. Wash thyself, therefore, and anoint thee, and put thy raiment on thee, and get thee down to the floor, but make not thyself known unto the man, until he shall have done eating and drinking. It shall be, when he lieth down, that thou shalt mark the place where he shall lie, and thou shalt go in, and uncover his feet, and lay thee down. And he will tell thee what thou shalt do. And she said unto her, All that thou sayest unto me I will do. And she went down to the floor, and did according to all that her mother-in-law bade her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn, and she came softly and uncovered his feet, and laid her down. And it came to pass at midnight that the man was afraid. I would be too. And turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. Surprise, surprise. And he said, Who art thou? It's funny how he switched up his question. He didn't ask who she was. Who art thou? And she answered, I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman. There's that term we were talking about. And he said, Blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning, inasmuch as thou followest not young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, fear not. I will do to thee all that thou requirest, for all the city of my people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman. And now it is true that I am thy near kinsman. Howbeit there is a kinsman nearer than I. Tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning, that if he will perform unto thee the part of a kinsman, well, let him do the part of the kinsman's part. But if he will not do the kinsman's part, the part of a kinsman unto thee, then will I do the part of a kinsman to thee, as the Lord liveth, lie down until the morning. And she lay at his feet until the morning, and she rose up before one could know another. And he said, Let it not be known that a woman came into the floor. And he said, Bring the veil that thou hast upon thee, and hold it. And when she held it, he measured 6 measures of barley, and laid it on her, and she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, Who art thou, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done to her. And she said, These 6 measures of barley he gave me, for he said to me, Go not empty to thy mother-in-law. Then said she, Sit still, my daughter, until thou knowest how the matter will fall. For the man will not be in rest until he have finished the thing this day. Awesome. What I want to do is I want to jump to question number 1, which takes us back slightly into chapter 2, into verse 20, where it says, Naomi praises Boaz for his kindness, using the same word as in verse 1:8. Covenant love, commitment, loyalty. How has Boaz already shown the loyal kindness of a relative to the dead? Verse 2:20, we're going to go back and read that for a second for the context. And Naomi said unto her daughter-in-law, Blessed be he of the Lord, who hath not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead. Who's she talking about right here? You can just raise your hand and I'll repeat it for the folks online. Who's she talking about right here? She says, And Naomi said unto her daughter-in-law, Blessed be he of the Lord, who hath not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead. Not a trick question at all, by the way. Her dead husband. 1. Somebody said something else.
God.
God. 2. Any other thoughts on this? Does my question make sense? Blessed be he of the Lord. Who's he? Sorry? Boaz? Okay, we got 3. And I think this distinction is important here because, it's not super clear on the face. She says, And Naomi said unto her daughter-in-law, Blessed be he of the Lord, who hath not left off his kindness. That is, the person who hasn't left off their kindness, in this context that we're jumping back into it, is Boaz. He has not left off being kind to the living and to the dead. And Naomi said unto her, The man is near of kin unto us, one of our next of kinsmen. This is Naomi praising Boaz for his kindness. And the question that we have in front of us is, what kindness? How has Boaz already showed the loyal kindness of a relative to the dead? How has he showed loyal kindness to the dead?
I think he's taking care of them, even like inadvertently. He's taking care of them. He's like made provision for them to have, I would say, probably more than they would normally get.
For those of you who didn't hear, a young lady wrangling two kids who may or may not also be mine said that I think that Boaz has been taking care of them. Am I right about that? That Boaz has been taking care of Naomi and of Ruth while in the absence of their husbands, because they both had husbands. It's absolutely one way that Boaz has shown kindness to the living and to the dead. Any other thoughts on that? In what ways has Boaz, same lady,
He's also like told them like, hey, I'll redeem you if this other guy doesn't. If I was next in line, I would do it, but I'm not. I'll see if he wants to. If he doesn't, I'll marry you.
true story. And before I forget, I'm gonna turn on these microphones. Absolutely, we haven't gotten there yet, but he has specifically said that she's basically claiming her right that he ought to marry her. Because to her knowledge, he's the closest kinsman they have. And so he's saying, okay, cool, yeah, count me in. I'll absolutely do it. And then in question 5, it says, how does Boaz show the kindness of a guardian redeemer? In chapter 3, verses 10 through 15, which is exactly what you just pointed out. One of the things that I find most interesting about this, and this is one of the questions that I mentioned last week that I don't have an answer to, so if you do, I would love to hear from you, is, to my knowledge, which is incomplete, the role of a guardian redeemer when it comes to levirate marriage is that of a brother-in-law. Boaz is not that, right? Boaz is the closest relative, I think, the closest male relative that's like eligible to do this. But for example, when the Pharisees give the story of the widow who had 7 husbands, it wasn't just some like cousin who came and said, "Okay, I'll marry you and have a kid in the name of your previous husband," but it was a brother-in-law. And as far as we know, and I think it's true, the husband of Ruth, I don't remember his name, doesn't have any brothers left. And so I think what's happening here is Boaz is the next closest thing. And he's volunteering to step in and be the guardian redeemer, be the kinsman redeemer. But correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, and I don't know, maybe it's the case that like the law had kind of grown and morphed as laws do over time, similar to the laws that the Pharisees had in the first century when Jesus was around about, for example, washing your hands, or, for example, how far they'd taken the Sabbath beyond what God had actually declared it to be. Maybe this is something like that. But I find that really, really interesting. It says in question 5, how does Boaz show the kindness of a guardian redeemer in verses 3 to 10? 1, he volunteers to marry Ruth. Any other way? There's certainly another way. How does he show the kindness of a guardian redeemer to Ruth? Absolutely. Absolutely. Chet, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. Chet said the way that he, I think you said the way that he told his servants to like keep their hands off of her, and also provide for her, as in dropping little extra grain to the side, making sure that she gets, and that Naomi gets what she needs. Miss Sharon mentions, by providing food to Ruth to let her glean the harvest, and even more, he backed off the younger men so that they would not bother her. In addition, he told her not to go to any other area to glean. And I wonder, maybe he told her to stick around because he knew just how much she would be in danger going anywhere else. Maybe he told her to stick around here because he didn't trust the farmer next door or the farmer on the other side. Absolutely. Question 6. We have in verse 3:10, Boaz praises Ruth for her kindness in seeking a middle-aged husband from Elimelech's family, rather than a young husband from another family. Toward whom is Ruth showing loyalty and love by doing this? There's another side to this question, but I want to pause there. Oh, yeah. No, it's not switching for me either. I'll read it again. Boaz praises Ruth for her kindness in seeking a middle-aged husband from Elimelech's family rather than a young husband from another family. Toward whom is Ruth showing loyalty and love by doing this? Naomi, absolutely. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but she's free to marry whoever she wants. She made big promises to Naomi, but she's here, and if she decides that, okay, that bet's off, I really like that guy, or the gleaner, the way he pulled his sickle, or I don't know, whatever attracted women in those days. But she chose Boaz so far, and that is absolutely a kindness shown to Naomi.
It shows her integrity too, because she did verbally say, your God is going to be my God, your people are going to be my people. So basically, it was a verbal covenant, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. But one of the things that I find interesting about this is that given it's the days of the judges, I think folks didn't. This is an assumption, speculation. I probably is better way to describe it. Is that I don't think folks took their covenants that seriously in these days, given the lawlessness that was in the country. So I think it sticks out that she followed through, was following through. Does that?
Right, her character is
Exactly.
referencing.
Absolutely. Who else was this showing kindness to? Just to, can you go to the mic for me? That'd be great. That'd be awesome. I love you too. Yeah, you'll see. James C, can you
She's got something to say too. I think she shows her husband kindness. It's interesting. There is a rabbi who paralleled Proverbs 31 with the book of Ruth. And one of the verses in Proverbs 31 is she does him good and not evil all the days of her life. It doesn't say all the days of his life.
That's great.
And so she's honoring her husband, even in his death, doing him good while she's alive, even though he is long gone. He might not be long gone, but he's not coming back.
Right.
That's excellent.
That's very, very interesting. Thank you. Miss Sharon also mentioned she's being loyal to Naomi. True. She's being loyal to God. Absolutely. And to his people. And as Chelsea just pointed out, also to her husband, Elimelech. Elimelech is the husband of Ruth. I get these confused all the time. Ruth or Naomi? Anybody know?
Naomi.
Of Naomi. Right. So maybe Mahlon or Kilian is the husband of Ruth.
Which one is her husband? Whoever her husband is.
That guy. Absolutely. I think it's also true that this also ends up, though he doesn't know in how many ways yet, this also ends up being a huge benefit to Boaz. Maybe she wasn't intentionally being kind to him, but it turns out that because she chose to follow through with her promise, with the covenant that she made with Naomi, because she chose to respect the laws of a foreign land that she's not from, Boaz ends up being in the lineage of Jesus. Boaz ends up being in the lineage of King David, something that wouldn't happen had Ruth not decided to stick to a word like this. Same question, different part of the question, how is Ruth's choice an act of kindness? And they give a series of verses here. And I think one of the other ways that this is an act of kindness, though, she doesn't, maybe isn't even thinking about it yet, is to her children, which aren't here yet. As a fresh dad, one of the things that comes to my mind a lot is how the decisions that I'm making right now are going to affect my children, I don't know, in 5 years and 10 years and 20 years. Them as parents, as they pattern their parenting after me. Scary thought, am I right? Or even children maybe that I don't even have yet. The decisions that I'm making right now, and maybe even on a little more like scary level, the decisions that I made 10 years ago, before I was even married, when I was a teenager in high school, or, just the way that the ripple effect continues on, regardless of whether or not we plan for things to like have effect that far in the future. Ruth is absolutely showing kindness to her children. For example, the kindnesses that my parents showed me in deciding to, for example, stick out, what? How do I put this? This is not news to anyone. Relationships are hard. Period. I think any kinds of relationships are hard, but close relationships maybe are the hardest. I can't think of, maybe you can, a closer relationship than that of the marriage relationship. And it requires all kinds of love and grace and I think in power from God in order to do well. And one of the things that I'm most grateful for is my parents' decision to respect the promises that they made, I don't know, 20, 30, it's been a long time, I couldn't tell you actually, but a long time ago when they gave their vows and decided to get married. That has had an incredible effect on my life. What's more, I think it's going to have an incredible effect on my children's life, but I don't think they were thinking about my kids when they were standing there with holding hands, saying, oh, I actually remember the vows, but I do. And I wonder how far along that's going to go. So I don't think Ruth was thinking about it, but I'm pretty sure it has a massive effect on, it's a great kindness shown to her kids, to her children to come. Any other ways that she's shown kindness or any other people that she's showing kindness to?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am. Can you ask him the microphone for those who are online who can't hear? I know. Please.
I'll ask you on my phone.
Safety first. Okay.
You could repeat it.
Question 7. I can, but I also want everyone else to speak into the microphone, and I don't want to ask less of you than I do of everyone. So great. Here we go. Question 7. For what kindness did Boaz commend Ruth in chapter 2, verses 11 and 12? I'll jump back to those and read those. And Boaz answered and said unto her, It hath fully been showed me all that thou hast done unto thy mother-in-law since the death of thine husband, and how thou hast left thy father and thy mother and the land of thy nativity, and art come unto a people which thou knewest not heretofore. For what kindness is Boaz commending her? For what kindness? Go ahead, Bernie.
Essentially being loyal, like it said in the one verse, by sticking with her, and going back to the land of her, her birth, and her commitment, like we said earlier. Your people are going to be my people. Your God is going to be my God, and she's trusting God to have Naomi give the proper guidance. She's just trusting the whole circumstance.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that when Boaz looks at the situation, he probably sees what everyone else saw, which is that there's really not much hope for these two people. When Ruth made that promise, when she made that commitment to Naomi, which, by the way, I think is a relatively easy commitment to make, it's a really, really hard one to follow through with. But when she made that commitment, I think what Ruth was looking at on the other side of this road was like destitution. Is destitution a word? I think it's a word. I hope it's a word. I think they were looking at like financial hopelessness. I think she was looking down the road and realizing, oh, I'm going to be like picking up other people's scraps. But I think that's what she was committing to. And Boaz, looking at that picture, I think he was commending exactly what you described, that she was willing to make a commitment like that she was willing to sacrifice for the sake of Naomi. Because it's interesting that Naomi didn't also go out and glean. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she was like beyond the age where that was an appropriate thing for her to do. But it suggests that maybe if Ruth wasn't there, how would she have gotten food? If Ruth wasn't there, like what laid in store for Naomi? Miss Tracy, it may not be on. You may have to push the button on the. Oh, there you go. You're good.
I feel like the kindness that Boaz was commending towards Ruth is he was just giving her words of blessing. And it reminds me of Numbers 6:24-26. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. I mean, he obviously knew what, he already said he knew what she was doing, and it was a great blessing to Naomi, and the kindness of his words to confirm it and to, like when I think about when Ruth said that she was going to make her God, Naomi's God, her God, it's not as if she's verbally saying, yes, he's my God, but she's saying certain things in her actions, and she did refer to something, I can't remember which verse, but I feel like he's just blessing her, giving her a blessing in her kindness.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I bet it was music to her ears. After, a long day of just gleaning in a field behind people where she didn't even know if she was wanted or not, to hear the owner, the man who had all the power in that place, blessing her. I imagine that meant a lot. Miss Judy says, because Ruth chose to go with Naomi as opposed to going back to her family, 1,000%. Miss Sharon mentions for her faithfulness and kindness to Naomi after the death of her husband and sons, including her husband, she even left her family and land. I forget about that. I forget about that regularly, actually. I think the odds that they're still grieving are really high. They both lost their husbands, their prospects for the future. I think the odds that they're still grieving the people that they love are really, really high. And there's something to be said for that. Question 8, we have Judges 21:25 says, in those days Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. That is, because the people did not acknowledge God as their king, and they had no human king. They did what pleased themselves. How are Ruth and Boaz different from most people? We're probably not going to exhaust this list. There are 1,000 ways. What are some that come to mind for you? How are Ruth and Boaz different from most people in this moment in history and in the story? Go for it, Ms. Tracy.
I feel like Ruth is different because if she did what she wanted to do, she didn't have to be there. Yeah. She didn't have to leave and join Naomi. I mean, Orpah didn't, Or she could have gone and went ahead and found her a young guy to marry, or, all of those other opportunities was there. I know some folks may not have she's from a different land and everything. And then with Boaz, he's obviously so different that the employees are greeting him with joy. Like he's walking out there greeting them with bless you. Yeah, bless you. And, he didn't have to be that type of businessman. He didn't have to be the man to say, well, let me verify with the other relative to see if he's going to want to marry you. He could have just took her on and been like, well, hey, I got whatever. There are so many different ways that they stand out with their integrity. A whole bunch of choices.
True. Very true. Thank you, Ms. Tracy. Any others? In what ways were Ruth and Boaz different from most people at this time?
Well, one thing, right there it says that everyone was doing what was right in their own eyes, and Boaz was doing what was right in God's eyes. And the same with Ruth.
Yep. Agreed. And I think in ways that he could have defied what God's law said here, and I don't think anybody would have blamed him for it. I see him, for example, like you mentioned, Ms. Tracy, saying oh, there's a nearer kinsman. I see that as him going above and beyond. I mean, really, it's just him meeting. I think it's him meeting God's law. But at a time like this, it probably looked like, him just soaring head and shoulders above everyone else, character-wise. Ms. Lill.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think he treated her with respect, because in that time, he treated her like a woman, not property, in the same sense,
He did.
For that time period, although we've come much further than that, hopefully, but she accepted that kind of treatment. and walked in a way where she was treated that way.
Yeah.
You know, she didn't act like a prostitute or whatever. She didn't act like
Right.
a lady eating or like that. She didn't use her womanly wiles. She did what she had to do. And then he treated her that way, which was a miracle. And he could have, there was honesty there wasn't any lying, because he didn't even have to mention about the other person that was before him. And then he still checked, and he was just honest the whole way through, from what we can tell, and so was she. That was unheard of.
Yeah. I think it's awesome.
Because when you picture doing your own thing, like if you look at today's and seeing the way people are, you just can't believe from the next thing to the next how far off the world is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's a bunch of examples of how Boaz goes above and beyond, like what you mentioned. I also think it's interesting that, like, when she came to lay at his feet, the way I've heard this described, because I don't understand it well, that she comes and uncovers his feet, is that this is a role of a servant. A servant is a person who comes and lays at your feet and just waits for like what your every whim. You wake up in the middle of the night, oh, I need to get me some water. You wake up, oh, I need to get me some food, or like, hey, go fetch me this thing. And she lays there, and I mean, what a moment for a man with a ton of power that the entire city recognizes, and a woman with none that the entire city recognizes. Like, this is a moment that today I think would produce a scandal. This is like a Me Too moment. This is a moment where like something goes very wrong here, and maybe she has the guts to talk about it years down the road. But Boaz, like, not only doesn't he try to take advantage of her, again, no one's around, right? They're alone here, and, you know, not only doesn't he try to take advantage of her, but he calls out how, like, oh, hey, yeah, I'll do this for you, but first, like, there's another person that I need to go check on. I think it's absolutely amazing. And on top of that, like, we see Boaz serving Ruth here. Remember, like, before she leaves and goes home, he says, whoa, take this with you. He serves her. This is backwards, right? I mean, at least in this culture, like, the woman is supposed to be serving the man. He serves her, but also at dinner, lunch, whatever it was after they were gleaning, he served her before then. This is just, there's lots of backwards thing for their culture happening here. Yes, ma'am.
Also, a businessman giving up anything free, like leaving things, that's unheard, not as often. And, you know, and then doing it in public, saying, hey, leave that. It's one thing to do it in private, but it's one thing to just do it in public. And because in the world now, it's like a weakness if a businessman would do that. And there was another one I was going to say that he made sure that he announced that he wanted her to be safe.
Yes.
Rather than trying to make earning something somewhere else, he made sure that she had the safety of his means to do that.
At cost to him.
Right, at a cost.
Yeah.
So that's, again, unheard of. And also, the world likes it when the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law don't get along.
That's so true.
They
That's
just
so
think,
true.
it's like they tell you ahead of time before you even start, you know, here's
Yeah.
some tips for getting along with your mother-in-law or father-in-law, whatever it may be. And they just totally,
Yeah.
blitz that one.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought about that before. Bernie.
I think they both had godly convictions, and they both endeavored to please God in whatever circumstance they found themselves in. So that made it harmonious.
Agreed. I think they did it without knowing what reward was on the other side, right? I mean, it'd be one thing if I don't know, God told Boaz, like, hey, treat this woman good, or like maybe not even that. Maybe he just said, like, hey, whatever you do for the next like 24 hours, I'm going to record, and people are going to be talking about it for thousands of years. So like, be on your P's and Q's. I could see somebody then like going this far to act righteously and act with good character. Likewise with Ruth. If you be like loyal to your mother-in-law here, like, I got you covered. I mean, imagine if God had told people that, like, hey, whoever accompanies Ruth and then marries Boaz is going to be in the lineage of the Savior, of the Messiah, or even of King David. I imagine women would have been jumping at the opportunity from left and right. But Ruth had no idea. She had no clue of the reward that was waiting on the other side for her. So, I think absolutely.
Possibly.
Sorry, go ahead.
Possibly,
What are you
because
thinking?
Naomi, I'm almost certain, was educating her in the scripture, or at least the ways of God, up to that point. So we can only guess that she was just doing this by instinct, or I think she really had a real relationship with God.
Sure.
I believe.
I think that could absolutely be. I think that's absolutely a possibility. It would make perfect sense given how,
Which would answer that question, what makes them different from the people of that time. They were people of faith, operating by faith, as opposed to everybody operating by what they could see.
Yeah.
You know.
Operating by, I'm going to get mine. Yeah. Agreed. Miss Tracy.
It's okay. She's a great person. But I definitely, I agree with what Bernie was saying. In the beginning, when I started this, I felt like I thought that when you read their story, that Naomi is more of a mentor to Ruth. And I do believe it's like she's discipling her, pretty much. Like when she says that she's going to follow her, and she follows her, and you can hear Ruth saying things to acknowledge that she's embraced this God that Naomi believed in. Even with Naomi being, call me Mara and all, bitter and things.
Sure.
Like you can still see that Ruth has embraced this God. Boaz had already represented that he, believed in God. But I was also thinking about the part where it says, in those days Israel had no king, everyone did as right in their own eyes. From the beginning, when Boaz told the people to pretty much protect Ruth, don't do anything to her.
Right.
And then when she's at his feet and he doesn't do anything to her, and it's like later on, they end up getting married, and it's like, wow, his protection, his verbal protection from the very beginning of don't do anything to this one, and he probably had the same insight for others. I don't know. It's not in the scripture, but knowing how he had that relationship with his employees, but to know that he was like, no, don't, because she could have been attacked, she could have been abused, she could have been raped, prostituted, whatever, all of that. But to know, did he know that was going to be his girl?
Yeah, right?
Yeah. It's like,
Did he
wow.
know he was protecting his wife when he said, keep your hands off her?
Exactly.
Wow. That's a great point.
Can I
Bernie.
bring something to your attention?
Go for it.
Sharon has responded about 5 times here.
Sorry, Miss Sharon. Go for it. Oh, you mean? Oh, yeah, sure. I'll read it. They were of the same mind in their faith in God. This is from Miss Sharon. They were in the same mind in their faith in God. Naomi followed her husband and was obedient to God, for he was her redeemer, kinsman. And I think I did read the one before that.
Okay.
But yes, thank you, Miss Sharon. I'm sorry for missing you on this. I'm working on it. I think we're going to try to end on question 9, which says, to what extent are Ruth's, Boaz's, and Naomi's attitudes toward family applicable to us, and why? We should probably start off with what were their attitudes toward family. To what extent are Ruth's, Boaz's, and Naomi's attitudes toward family applicable to us? What attitudes toward family do we see from them from what we're reading in this book?
For me, it's family no matter what the situation. So whether you're in a bad situation or as Boaz was in a good situation, family is still at the heart of it, and you treat it respectfully, because that's what they did. They honored family. And that family was defined not even just by blood in this case, because it was a daughter-in-law and a mother-in-law.
True.
So that was like huge, because again, that is not what we do in this world. We tend to, we're not blood or whatever. So I think that is the key thing. And then with Boaz, whoever that other person was that was ahead of him, again, it said that person didn't want to mess up their family for whatever reason. So all of that kept going back to family. The whole core was family.
Agreed. Contrasts pretty significantly to our culture. Absolutely. Thank you. Ms. Tracy.
I feel like Man, I cannot remember what I was thinking. Yeah. So, I know, hold on. Oh,
You can-
yes.
She got it.
That your family's reputation is important. Just because of, the support and everything that your family has, but how your reputation as a family is important. Because with Naomi and Ruth, her discipling her and basically teaching her that faith walk, it seems like, and then with Boaz already having a reputation that people recognize, it was a good reputation. And he had already noticed that in Ruth and connecting it with Naomi, and just the importance of the reputation of your family. And just, your Christian faith, just as a whole, is important. With it makes, how you move, how you talk, how you walk, how you think, how, like, everything being just how you're representing Christ. It just seems like in some of the words that they say and all of that, I feel like it's some of the principles.
Agreed. And I think that I think it also shows to that point that they've understood really, really well that the actions that they took reflected not just on themselves, but on their family and on the people around them. Miss Lil.
And especially important, too, is the respect for elders, and then the elders' respect for the youth, because it showed both. It's easy to see how they respected each other, because they both could have pushed different buttons, but they decided to be respectful, ultra respectful in any case. And so did Boaz, like you said, with him being like he was. He could have just called on her and did whatever he wanted to do, and nothing would have been said. So it was all that respect.
Agreed. Thank you, Miss Lil. Mrs. Golden?
In a culture where everyone does right in their own eyes, their faith and obedience to God, instead of doing what they might have wanted to do or felt was right, the Lord blessed that significantly.
He did. He did, and he did it more than once. Over and over and over again from a single decision or a few decision points like we have in the story. Bernie, did I miss you?
You ready?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. To me, it shows that they all live by the higher law of love, which is, the highest law. And also it reflects a bigger picture of God's inclusivity, I guess is a better way to say that. He says, my house is a house of prayer for all people. So he's not showing respect to persons here. Whoever comes to him, he will not know wise cast well.
That's a great point. Really well said. I love that. That they follow the higher law of love. It shows. All the ways that we describe that Boaz has gone above and beyond, it shows. Miss Sharon also says, piety starts at home. That hits hard. 1 Timothy 5:4, she references, the two shall become one. Then also, honor your father and mother. On a roll, Miss Sharon. Teaching their family about the Lord and who he is, just as Abraham taught his family. That hits hard. As a father of young kids, that hits hard. I think
Your father's on here too.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, I'm coming. He's coming. Yeah. Hey, Dad. I think we, as a Christian church, maybe it's an American thing, I don't know. I think we have a bad habit of delegating the discipleship of our children off to the church. Delegating the discipleship of our children off to a Sunday school teacher or youth group leader or even the pastor, when nobody can disciple our children like we can. So that's a great point, Ms. Sharon. Dwayne M. Golden, my dad, says, the attitude towards family here shows the importance of their elder in the family to demonstrate support, hope, and direction to the younger in the family. Absolutely. Thank you. Any others before we close out? Yes, Ms. Lil.
Just one more thing. That last statement, state some of the principles of Christian family duty. The fact that you have to recognize that there is a Christian family duty. And you listed a lot of them in the room, everybody listed them, but it's unlike what the world is. There is a Christian family duty, and there's a whole list of things that you need to recognize in order to accomplish that. But the fact that that exists, you have to know that.
Right.
That there are duties, like Tracy said, things. You're representing your family, you affect your family, everything everybody said falls under those 3 words.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It makes starting. I suppose step 1 is acknowledging that there's such thing as Christian family duty. You're not independent. Right. Absolutely. Miss Lil said you're not independent. Sorry, no, it's okay. It's for everyone. She now yelled it back to the microphone because she loves y'all. Thanks. Thank you very much. Any other thoughts on this before we close out? Yes, please.
It's not just family like Steve and I. It's our family here, our church family. It's the same thing. We're a Christian family and we have duties, so it's not just a husband-wife kind of thing. It's all. And then I'm same thing with myself and say Johnny and Tracy, or myself and Tom, whoever. It's not defined like just one thing, like just grouping thing. When anybody walks through our door here at the church gets loved on. We don't wait till they belong to the choir or whatever like that. It's
Right.
That's what I think it's trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to have like tenure before you're loved, and it's not exclusive to bloodlines, like you mentioned earlier. And I think it would fit perfectly. I think based on what we read about Boaz here, we could safely assume that if another woman who wasn't related to, even through marriage, to Naomi or a family member, another woman came to his field and gleaned like this, that he would treat her the same way, even if he didn't have prospects for marrying her, based on the behavior that we're seeing from him. But Vanessa, we're going to close on that question 9, and before, let me just check and make sure. Miss Sharon says absolutely, Lil and Tracy. I probably didn't need to read that one, but there we go. Fantastic. All right, we're going to close out, and then we're going to take some prayer requests. Before we do, I think the pastor's home, just as an update, right? Is that true? Confirmed? Yes, ma'am. Sweet. That's awesome. That's great news. I'm sure, I speak for him, and much less when I say thank you for praying for him. I'm sure he's super, super grateful, and he probably still needs prayer as he continues to recover, even being back home. Mm-hmm. I'm sure he's glad to have his pillow back and not be sleeping in a hospital bed.
For sure.
But yeah, absolutely. Let's close out the stream, and then we'll take some prayer requests. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Thank you for participating online. Thank you for being patient with my not actually seeing your questions soon. I'm working on it. But have a great night.